Hi, I'm Chad with Move Forward Guitar. This lesson is from our course Intermediate Course 2. If you'd like to see the rest of the lessons in this course, download the jam tracks and download the corresponding eGuide, which includes detailed charts and diagrams for each lesson. Click the link on the screen or look in the description below. Welcome to Lesson 5. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you your first bar chord. So now we're going to take a huge step in learning guitar, and obviously you've come a really long way just to get to this point. Now we're to the next big hurdle that once you get it down, it's just going to open up a ton of doors in your playing and make a lot of other stuff a lot easier to you. And that's learning bar chords. And most really struggle when learning bar chords, so be patient. It's usually pretty hard at first to get down, but once you do, like I said, it's just going to open up a ton of doors for you and make all other chords a lot easier to learn and play. And bar chords are one of the big reasons, like I mentioned before, why I started with open string chords and power chords, because those were a good transition for getting you ready to play bar chords. So the first bar chord we're going to learn is a B minor bar chord. I think it's one of the easiest to learn, and it's one that you can use all the time, so it's definitely, in my opinion, the best one to learn first. So a bar chord, like I mentioned when we played an F major chord, that's technically a bar chord. I mentioned that in the beginner course because you're barring two separate strings with one finger. You were barring the second and first string in the first fret with your first finger. That's a little bar. Now we're playing a bar chord where you're having to bar more strings, or at least across more strings, so it makes it a lot more difficult. You can see my first finger, that's the finger that's creating the bar for this B minor chord in the second fret, where I'm having to fret through the fifth string all the way down towards the floor through the first. Technically, I have these fingers playing in front of my first finger, so I'm only catching the fifth string and the first string with my first finger, but I still need to bar all those strings just to get the fifth and the first to ring out together. And before I go too deep into the chord, I'll give you some tips that'll help you while you're trying to learn it yourself. And the first is that it's going to be a lot easier on an electric guitar. If you have an electric guitar, it's much easier to fret notes on electric guitar, so it makes it a lot easier to play bar chords. But if you don't worry. I'm playing it on acoustic. I learned on an acoustic, so you don't have to use an electric. It's just if you do have one, it'll make it easier for you. And another big tip, even if you're using electric, but on an acoustic will help a lot too, is to use a capo and fret on like the third or fourth fret to play the bar chord. Now you're going to play the bar chord way up here, which is going to get your strings closer to the fretboard, which will help a lot. The capo is getting your strings closer to the fretboard. It makes it a lot easier to fret these notes. It's still that B minor bar chord shape. It's just now we're playing it way up here. So it's not technically a B minor anymore, but that shape's going to stay the same. And when you go back to the B minor without a capo, it'll be a lot easier to play. So I recommend putting a capo on the third or fourth fret. That'll help a lot for getting your strings down and making it easier to fret the chord. And the reason that shape stays the same is, again, like the power chords, there's no open strings, so this is a movable chord. I'm playing a B minor bar chord right now, but if you look in your eGuide, the root note is red again, which is in the same place as the power chords on the fifth string. That means that if I know the name of that note that I'm on a B note right here for my root note, that's a B minor chord. If I moved up half a step, this is a C note that my fifth is on the fifth string that my first finger is holding. This is a C minor chord. So no matter where you are up and down the fretboard, whatever your root note is the name of the chord. And this is a minor chord, so if you're on an E, it's an E minor. It never changes from minor, but the root note just changes the first part of the name of the chord. So if I'm on E, it's E minor. If I'm on D, it's D minor, and so on. But for now, we're just going to focus on the B minor, because you'll run across the B minor a lot in easier keys like the key of D or the key of G. So this is a really good one to learn first. Another important thing which you might not have control over is the distance between your strings to your fretboard. If your strings are really high off your fretboard, if I turn my guitar like this, the distance between the string to the actual fretboard or the frets, if that's really high, that's going to make it really hard to fret chords in general, but especially bar chords, because bar chords take a lot more pressure. So if you see a big distance between your strings and the fretboard, you might need to bring it into a professional who can set up your guitar and try to get your strings lower. And that's called action. If your strings are way off your fretboard, it means you have high action. And if you have high action, it makes it a lot harder to fret chords and notes. If your action is too low, your strings are going to buzz because they're going to be hitting the frets so much, the fret wires. But if it's too high, it makes it really hard to fret. So if there's a really big distance between the strings and the fretboard, if you can, bring it into a professional and see if they can lower your strings. And then the last tip when learning bar chords is to take lots of breaks. This is probably going to wear your hand out fast, so do it in short increments, take a lot of breaks, and come back to it. At first, you might only be able to do it a little bit each day, and then over time, you're going to build your hand strength, and it'll be really easy to you to play bar chords all the time. But just like any muscle that you're building, it takes time to build it, and if you do too much at once, you're at risk of injuring your hand, or in general, it's just going to wear out really quickly, and you're not going to be able to play it. And this B minor bar chord, I'm going to go over the fingerings. If you were to play the B power chord, you've got a lot of the bar chord down already, because now you just need to add in your second finger and then bar the rest of the strings with your first finger. And that turns it into a bar chord, a B minor bar chord. So now you have your first finger in the second fret, fretting from the fifth string all the way through the first string. You're fretting all those strings down. That's your bar that you're creating. Again, when you create bars like this, you want your thumb right behind the finger that's creating the bar, your first finger, down lower on the neck. You don't want it up high. This is going to be a lot harder. And something really important is that your thumb, like I've mentioned before, is keeping your neck in place, and your finger is pulling back into your thumb. You're not squeezing. If you squeeze, you're going to wear your hand out really fast. So your thumb is just keeping there stationary, and your first finger is pushing back towards your thumb. That's how you can get this to ring out. And it's really important that you're up close towards the fret wire in the front of the fret like we've done before with all other chords, but it's really important for when you're creating a bar, because if you're back farther, it's going to take a lot of pressure to get that to ring out. So make sure you're up towards the front fret wire, and it looks like I'm on top of the fret wire, but I'm not. I'm actually putting pressure behind the fret wire. And that's another important thing, is that you're not barring with the flat part of your finger right here. You're actually barring on the side of your finger. That's really important. It's really hard to get a bar and get all the notes to ring out if you go right on the flat part, because your finger curves in a lot in different spots, and it'll be really hard to get enough pressure. So you do it more on the side of your finger right there. So if I was to hold my finger there in position, I'm not holding it totally flat like this. I roll it back a little bit so I can get on the side. And even if it looks like I'm on the fret wire, all my pressure is behind the fret wire. So that's a big thing to understand when doing bar chords, and something a lot of people don't realize that's going on. But that'll make it a lot simpler to bar those notes. And that's what I recommend starting with, is just barring in the second fret, having your thumb behind your first finger. You can even put your second finger on top of it to start off with to give a little more pressure, and just trying to get all those notes to ring out from the fifth string through the first string. So trying to get them all to ring out without buzzing or muting, and that'll probably take quite a bit of work, but over time become easy, just like everything on guitar. Start with that and then add in your other fingers, because the bar is going to be the most difficult part. Another thing that's really important is that my elbow is towards my body. It's not out here like this. If you turn your elbow out here, you're going to get your hand in a funny position. As you can see, I'm angled through that fret. If I bring it in towards my body, now my finger is vertical in that fret, vertical right parallel with that fret wire. So make sure your elbow's not out like this, which is something a lot of people can get in the danger of when they're trying to struggle to get something. You need to bring your elbow back in towards your body. And you can see I have a nice bend in my wrist. I have nice distance between my hand and the guitar. I'm not up like this with my elbow bent, with my wrist bent straight and my thumb up. Everything is down, my thumb's down, my wrist is down and has a nice bend in it. But make sure that you're not bending too far out like this, then you're going to put too much strain in the back of your hand. You need to bring it back a little bit so that this part of your hand is not sticking out like that. It needs to look more like this. So you can see it's bent back at an angle here. It's not vertical up and down with the rest of my fingers. bring that back a little bit. Otherwise, you're going to put too much strain on the back of your hand. So again, once you get that bar down, then you can add in your other fingers, and you're going to add your third finger on the fourth string, fourth fret, your fourth finger on the third string, fourth fret, and your second finger on the second string, third fret. And so technically, your first finger is only fretting and getting notes to ring out the fifth string and the first string. But you are holding down the rest of the strings just so you can get those two notes to ring out. It'd be really hard to arch your finger to fret the fifth string and the first string without barring just through all the strings. And then just like the power chord that starts on the fifth string, you're muting out the sixth string just with the tip of your first finger. So another important thing when you're learning bar chords is when you're getting your hand in position, don't just automatically grab the strings and start fretting because your hand's going to wear out really fast. Get it into position, but right now my hands are just on top of the strings without fretting down, so I'm not putting any pressure on the strings or straining my hand at all, but I can get my hand in position, and then when everything's ready, all my fingers are ready, then I can put the pressure down and try to get the strings to ring out. If I'm just constantly holding that pressure, my hand's going to wear out really fast. And another thing I should have mentioned, don't just jump into bar chords if your hands aren't warmed up. Play something that's easier on your hands. Get your hand really warmed up. You can look online, there's different stretching exercises that can help too for your hand, and then start doing bar chords. If you just jump right into bar chords when your hands aren't warmed up, you're going to hurt your hand most likely. So really warm up first. So once you think you have it, get your hands in place, put the pressure down, strum through the strings, check each string just like we've done with all chords. Anything's muted, buzzing, or sounding funny, you have to keep readjusting. And again, if they are muted or sounding weird, release the pressure, adjust your fingers, and then add the pressure back. And most likely it's going to sound something like this when you first start off. You're going to hear a lot of muted stuff and buzzing things. That's just part of learning bar chords. It takes a lot of work to get all the notes to ring out clearly. So don't get frustrated if when you first start you're like only able to get a couple notes to ring out. That's just part of learning bar chords for most people. So again, that's a B minor bar chord. So for practice, just work on this bar chord, do it like I was telling you, start with your bar, and just make sure that you follow the techniques that I was giving you, the advice I was giving you, and to make sure that when you're grabbing the bar chord that you're using proper hand technique and that you're not squeezing down on the bar chord as soon as you grab it. You want to wait until your fingers are in place and then put the pressure on. And again, don't squeeze your thumb and your fingers together. You're holding your thumb behind there and pulling with your fingers back towards your thumb. That's really important not to create a squeezing motion. That'll really wear out your hand fast. But again, just take lots of breaks. It's going to be difficult at first. It is for almost everyone who learns bar chords. So just do it over and over, and eventually it's going to become easy to you, and it'll open up a lot of doors for playing all different types of chords. So once you're able to play that bar chord, go ahead and move on to the next lesson, and we'll keep moving forward.